Welcome to The Derivative by RCM Alternatives. Send it. Hello there. Welcome back to The Derivative, brought to you by RCM Alternatives, where we just launched a new website. Head on over to rcmalts.com to check it out. We were off last week for 4th of July. I was out in Colorado. Unfortunately, no skiing, but at my daughter's softball tournament. 1,200 teams, 14,000 girls, overpriced courtyard by Marriott. It's just what the founders had in mind 250 years ago. On to this podcast where we chat with Tom Ferguson of Burnt Island Ventures, which is doing seed investing and VC in the water technology space. What is water tech? I didn't know either when I met with him at a conference a few months ago, earlier this year. So wanted to have him on the pod and tell us what is happening in the water space, why water and why now. And of course, debate water world versus water boy. Send it. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I got to ask right away what the shirt is. Kala?
Yes. Sorry, I realized I dressed like a sloven for your
You dressed like a podcast host.
Another VC in a t-shirt, which is all very hackneyed. No, this is Kala Systems, who did a blank sheet redesign of the water heater according to the logic and physics of the heat pump. And yeah, $14 billion non-discretionary domestic market. They've essentially turned the water heater into a battery, which is really cool. Anyway, they're great, based just outside of Boston.
I wore my aqua colored shirt to talk water.
Very appropriate and much appreciated.
Water, is this like the inline in the wall water heater? Everyone was all up in arms about that a few years ago.
Oh,
that's
in the wall. No, this isn't. This is going to replace your kind of classic standalone large 50-gallon water heater, basically. But it's just 20% of home energy use goes into making water hot. And it's kind of the substrate of all of our lives, from, cooking to washing to whatever it is. And it's just ridiculously inefficient, really terrible. And now everybody's electricity is going up, and it's going to go up more because there are going to be time of use rates that are coming in. So the peak hour electricity is going to be at a differentiated price. Anyway, it's one of these really interesting places where water crosses over with energy in terms of, people's lives and the expense of their livelihoods. And just, this is a great example of just a team that's been absolutely spectacular to watch work. Best piece of hardware execution that we've seen. Really, really amazing.
Love it. Little background. So we were just talking offline. You're both Scottish and British,
so
if possible, like 007.
So the heart's from
Sean Connery,
Scotland. The heart's from Scotland. The accent's from London, which means sort of excluded by both, I guess. But our quadripartite country. Yeah, no, the name of the fund is actually from the west coast of Scotland. Burnt Island Ventures. The Burnt Islands are on the west coast, which is near where my parents spend most of their time and where my dad grew up. And then
Is it literally burnt, or why is it called burnt?
So there used to be a fort on it, and kind of there are these three little islands that sit in the middle of my favorite view in all the world. And a very, very long time ago, a couple of thousand years, there was a kind of a fort on there that somehow had been set fire to. And so the name, it was initially in Gaelic, and then it was initially in Gaelic, the Scottish language, and then it was obviously translated into the anglicized version of it. But the burnt of it refers to the fort that had burned. And so, there's little three little islands that sit at the mouth of this sort of stretch of water next to an island called Bute. And so, we're very much a Scottish connection. And that's why, if you go to our website, lots of pictures of sort of the set of Highlander, basically.
Nice.
So we kind of keep that connection.
But you were happy to see England win last night over Mexico?
We were in the very, very small subsection of people who were supporting England in the place that we were at. So but what's great is that we have the ability to support 4 different teams, Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So this time we had 2 teams in the tournament with the Scots, who we were just saying, very proud of the performance, both of the lads on the pitch and the lads off it.
Yeah, I think the lads off of it got more attention.
Yeah, it did get a little bit more attention. But it's fun. It's fun. Scotland and England are very, very different places with populations that don't necessarily always get on. But I like to think of myself as a bridge between those two darling communities.
I love it. And so, how do you consider yourself a VC guy or a water guy or both? And how'd you get into that?
So definitely a water guy first, for sure. And as a VC guy, that was not my training actually. He started off in water, firstly as a consultant. So I used to work for, now it's owned by KKR, but Environmental Resources Management, which is the largest pure sustainability consultancy in the world. And that's where I got my start in water, as I did a piece of work that essentially allowed me to understand the data and strategies of a whole bunch of very large companies better than anyone else. And so that was a big part of my work while I was there. But then after grad school, I chose to focus I kind of fallen in love with the early stage company creation as an idea. So I went to run an accelerator, and that was my grounding, which is incredibly helpful because when you're running a non-profit accelerator with essentially no budget, you've got to convince all the best founders in the world to come work with you without giving them any money. And so you kind of have to kind of haul ass, as they say, to make sure you're as useful to them as possible, which is really, really good grounding for venture, because a lot of venture people just sort of write a check and then wander off and concentrate on the company building and assistance side of things. Whereas that was my training. But yeah, no, I did that for 5.5 years, which made me into an early stage water company specialist. That was with an amazing group called Imagine H2O.
Where was that?
Sorry?
Where was that?
I was in San Francisco. So I moved out to San Francisco after grad school in 2014 with kind of stars.
So cliche. Are there was one accelerator here in Chicago, 1794 Ventures or something. But right, like most of the accelerators are in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, you have actually a fantastic organization based in Chicago that's going to be doing a lot more work. They do some fantastic work with early stage companies, but they're going to be doing a lot more of it. It's called Current, run by a brilliant lady called Elena Harkness, and my partner Steve is on the board. Chicago is an amazing kind of living laboratory for all things water. You have a couple of phenomenal utilities that do really great work, but Current has done a fantastic job of kind of building it up. But yeah, it was the San Francisco move that I wanted to go and see why it was so powerful. Why is it that early stage companies, why has this ecosystem come up, and what did that ecosystem mean? And I think I'm really glad I did, because there's one thing reading about it, and there's one very different thing actually kind of experiencing it and really understanding and internalizing why that overall ecosystem is so powerful and actually very hard to replicate.
Did you get your answer?
After 8 years, we were done.
What was the answer? What's the why? Just a bunch of smart people in a very tight space?
A bunch of smart people in a very tight space with essentially unlimited capital. No, that's obviously the narrative. You know what I really think is at the core of it is that there are two things, and they're essentially cultural. Firstly, no one cares if you fail. And it's one thing saying that it's fine if you fail. You can always say it. But if there's any price to it, it doesn't work. So, people in kind of London or whatever will say, like, yes, absolutely, we're much more accepting of failure. Well, there's accepting a failure, and then there's actually not only not caring, but being excited when people have gone through the process of being in a company that hasn't worked, because people naturally learn a whole bunch of really, really important things that they're going to carry with them when they try the next time. And that's why people don't mind. It's because it's such an important learning experience. But saying you don't care and actually watching people not care in the way that they don't care in the Bay Area is one thing. Or two very different things. And then the second one is really fascinating, because I see it pop up all the time, is that people genuinely help each other. And I'm always very surprised at the degree to which it is sort of not in the water that we swim in a lot of other places. And it's
Pun
not
intended.
Each other. It's actually having that natural instinct of, yes, I know a person who's doing this, I should connect to you. But that's kind of everybody's aspect. That's the way in which they look at the world. And it's so tightly ingrained. And it obviously helps that it's very well networked and all that kind of stuff.
You think it's all from a karma standpoint? Like, let me help them out so someone helps me out one day? Or it's just,
I think
they're all Midwesterners. They're all polite.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's one of actually the last vestiges of kind of the classic old world. Because it's now, there's a lot more to it that's much more mercenary now. But I think it's residual from its origins of, people not wearing any shoes and kind of like a hippies and like the people at Atari that had like a hot tub like in their manufacturing thing where they would hold their meetings and everything was actually really kind of like countercultural, but like because everyone felt they were doing something different and they were on the edge of the country and they were breaking all the rules and technology was a new frontier, etc. They kind of only had each other versus IBM or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so they had to help each other. And I think that it's really a kind of a continuation of that ethos, but obviously now overlaid by, pretty astonishingly large kind of overall complex around it, which is obviously much more mercenary. But the way in which it's stuck culturally, I think, are the things that stand apart. And as everyone knows, the most difficult thing to replicate is culture, right? And that it's still very much there. And I feel very, very lucky to have lived it for 8 years.
And were you the unpopular guy at the party of like all this cool tech stuff going on, and you're like, oh, I'm looking at manufacturing pumps for water and whatnot?
100%. I will tell
you don't have any virtual anything?
That is still the case. Yeah. So, I mean, when you go there now, and this was one of the reasons why, I mean, the AI takeover there is pretty extreme. And it really is. I mean, everybody, I mean, you throw a shoe and you're going to hit 4 people that have got an AI startup, which is fine, right? That's absolutely okay. But yeah, when people sort of slightly look at me sideways for sure. When I say, well, I mean, yeah, I invest in early stage water technology companies. The only reaction is, oh, cool. And then sometimes there's a follow up, but mainly people just sort of move on. But I think it is fun when you meet the odd person where the light bulbs come on and you manage to kind of point out what is actually kind of true, right? Which is that water is at the base of everything, right? This is the substance on which we all rely. Whether you're building a data center or building a car plant or getting out of bed in the morning wanting to have a bowl of pasta, like water is everywhere. You just don't see it because certainly in the developed countries, right, that we have this extraordinary privilege of being able to take water almost entirely for granted, and so we never actually think about it. But when you do think about it, it's everywhere. And watching those light bulbs come on, it doesn't happen as often as I would like, but when you are in, when you do see the light bulbs come on, it's pretty gratifying because I know how important it is. And I love working in it, partially for that reason. But most people totally underestimate it.
One of the cool things about water I've always thought about is it's ancient, right? It's like one of the oldest things on the earth, but we think of it as fresh water. Right? Yeah. Like, ooh, I need a fresh glass of water. Like that might have passed through some dinosaurs, passed through a few hundreds of thousands of feet of rock over its lifetime. It's like literally millions of years old and we're just taking it for granted. Yeah.
No, exactly. It's like, we live on the correct way to conceptualize the earth is that we're literally in a spaceship, right? We're in a closed system spaceship, which is a whole bunch of like stardust essentially. But
with a shield.
We happen to have the raw ingredients for this magical substance. I found out the other day that there was a period of history in which it rained for 2 million years. And I was like, well, for a Scottish person, that's like Tuesday.
Yeah, whatever.
So that's fine. But yeah, I mean, it's done everything, right? It's the oceans. It's shaped essentially the entirety of the land. It's the world's most important and sort of profoundly base substance, which I think makes it really interesting. I've always loved ideas that I think are kind of slightly hiding in kind of plain sight. And the fact that water is important is definitely up there.
Well, you can go 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, I think is the rule of 3.
That's the one.
So right there, that's right next to air.
Yes, exactly. Do you go up or down the chain?
Talk to me water technology. What does that mean? Like everything, anything that touches water?
Yeah. So
what does it mean to you?
We don't mess with the salty stuff. We turn salty stuff fresh. So we don't do ocean technology. That's outside of our circle of competence. Though we know tons of people who do really, really good work in that vertical, and it's great because we really need to protect our ocean health and and it's a phenomenal way to spend your time. But we do everything that's on land. So we are freshwater stewardship, essentially. So the way in which we put it, it's any technological intervention that allows water to be delivered at the right quality, quantity, price, place, and time. But crucially, that overall system needs to be managed. So it's any intervention in the management of that system as well. So what that gives us is a massive amount of breadth. So this is an enormous market, $1.6 trillion a year in capex and opex. That's growing at about 5 to 8% of the year. So off that size of a denominator.
1.6 trillion a year?
$1.6 trillion a year in capex and opex.
Woo. More than AI? What's the AI spend?
What is the AI expense on? Well, it keeps on changing because every marginal.
Yeah, we'll leave that as a rhetorical question for the listeners to look up. But yeah,
Well, I actually don't know what the latest numbers are for the 2026 build out. Though they were going to say they said they were going to put 6 trillion in the ground last year, and then they only were able to build about 1.6, I think, which is its own kind of can of worms about will build out because that also is reliant on water. Even though it's not actually that much water, but we can get into that if you want. But so we really are, our space to play at Burnt Island is any technical any intervention actually in the entire stack that allows that system to be managed and managed better.
Because and what do you mean by
about the way in which clean water is delivered to you in your home, which is essentially a civil engineering miracle, is that it's the equivalent of the technological equivalent of as if you still had a kind of a brick phone, maybe even older than that, like a phone in a briefcase was the kind of the mobile phone, the cell phone.
Yeah, the Gordon Gekko.
Yeah, there's massive kind of like comedy, huge brick thing, right? The whole of water is essentially entirely antiquated. And so there are two jobs that are in process, which is sort of mind-boggling when you think about them. Firstly, the Western world's infrastructure needs to be entirely replaced, such as the nature of physical assets, right? But there is a sort of specific cycle where the bill has come due. Stop investing in water at the end of the 70s, and if you ask any engineer, you're building these physical assets for a 40-year useful life. We are now 46 years on from when we stopped investing, and the bill is come due. And I'm from London. Everybody gets very excited about our Victorian sewer system, but it's a Victorian sewer system. Like, very impressive. It's stuck around for this long, but you need some upgrades. And then for vast swathes of the world, the infrastructure on which people need to rely, right, has not actually been built yet. You've got 750 million people without access to reliable drinking water, but 2.1 billion without access to reliable sanitation, which is the real crime. And
so wastewater is part of this whole thing?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Water, wastewater, stormwater, obviously agricultural and aquacultural. We do consumer products as well. So it's really, it's any intervention that touches the freshwater overall ecosystem to delete some kind of problem. And
you've mentioned that intervention word a couple of times. But explain that to me. So not a product, not a manufacturing, an intervention.
Yeah. So, well, because it just sort of, obviously the hardware you're going to be building is because products are never just products, right? They're a medium for a delivery of a value proposition. It doesn't, it's what the thing does rather than the thing itself that's powerful. And so actually it is an intervention in people's lives because it's there to kind of, delete some kind of problem, whether or not it's having to buy $85 a month worth of bottled water. You can just extract that water from the air and it's actually cost competitive, all the way to getting PFAS out of forever chemicals, which we successfully poisoned the world with these chemicals that now need to be deleted. But the reason we use the word intervention is because it's also like the software and services side of things, right? You whether it's emergency response or the installation of home shutoff valves or insurance or whatever it is. There are so many different products to do with water, both hardware and software. And it helps us think about these companies in the right way, is that like you're trying to do the hardest thing that you can do, which is get people to act differently, right? Just the act of buying a new product is doing something that they by definition weren't doing before. And people don't like doing new things. So yeah, but actually no one's ever called me up on that before.
I'm thinking I've unfortunately had to do a few interventions on behalf of friends and family in my time. So it triggers something for me of like a different intervention.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, that can definitely go in a couple of different ways, and you obviously have to sometimes intervene with the founders. So yeah,
Right. But
we
you're
don't
just right.
use
Like
it.
it's literally like I need to put this thing in the middle of this system to make it better. That's
Right, exactly. Something that didn't make sense. Well, this is the thing when we think about that $1.6 trillion number, right? Almost by definition, that $1.6 trillion number is being spent either on antiquated crap, right?
mm,
Or it is being spent on paying people to participate in a job that relies on processes and technologies and tools that could be a hell of a lot better, right? Which would free up their time to do much better things. So there's so much to do. You know, a great example is we're investors in our growth fund in a company called Aquamembranes, which is only the fourth physical intervention in the reverse osmosis module. Now, you may have seen the inside of a desalination plant, big, long, white
I
kind
have
of.
not. Yeah.
Like if you just look up an image, you'll see these sort of stacks of big long tubes, and
Yeah.
inside of those are essentially kind of big water filters, but they're big flat sheets of membrane, all just wound up. But the big fat the big flat sheets of membrane just sort of wound up. But that's the fourth physical intervention. Aquamembranes is the fourth major physical intervention since the reverse osmosis technology was invented in the 50s and commercialized in the 60s, and is still the workhorse of
Mm.
all kinds of water treatment up to and including desalination, which is, I mean, if like you can't think of many other places where the kind of core technology is something that was installed in the 60s. It certainly wouldn't fly in, the telecoms or any really
Right.
kind of like information technology vertical. And that's really what we're dealing with, right? We need to drag the water sector kicking and screaming into, I mean, I'd take the 20th century to be honest, but like the 21st century.
And what's the main prohibitor there? Like you're dealing with utility companies that are not really for profit, right? Is there not a profit motive for a lot of these companies to implement this?
There are a number of things. Yeah. I mean, one of them, a lot of people just sort of blame utilities for being slow. And it really
Mm.
is, these are phenomenal, ridiculously dedicated professionals who are insanely good at their jobs. Like the privilege of being able to ignore water, wastewater, and stormwater services, essentially, right, is
Yeah.
testament to the quality of their work. So they've got to be careful, right? So some stuff by definition is slow, but if you pick the right company, they're not slow at all, right? They can be, we have a couple of companies that are selling to utilities. The sales cycle is 62 and 78 days at the moment. If you're
Mm.
picking the right problem to work on, utilities can move like lightning. In terms of upgrading it, there are a couple of things that it's kind of worth bearing in mind. Firstly, and we're on their side, obviously, but we are the people who are providing the new technologies need to do a better job of selling them.
Mm.
Essentially, one of the really interesting parts of investing in water at the moment, and the reason why I decided to go after this in 2020 was that we finally had at that time, and it's multiplied since then, but we finally had a critical mass of really, really high quality entrepreneurs. We'd always had brilliant individuals, right? We had my partner Christine and our venture partner Wayne Byrne and the venture partner Paul Hoff and a bunch of other people who built companies, sold them, did a great job, but they were also always kind of in isolation. But by 2020, we had a proper stable of really fantastic people that could go to somebody with a problem and actually do a good job of empathizing and really understanding them and communicating them well and having the right materials and being able to couch their intervention in the language that was going to be able to be far more effective to get this to be actually adopted in order to solve the problem in whoever this person's life was. So actually the most important kind of determinant of pace and pace of change is an ability to tell stories, right? Is to help people see that there is a better way and then actually do something about it. But there are all sorts of structural things that people have to be aware of when they're building into this market. A big one, for example, is the role of the consulting engineer.
Mm.
They are kind of the gatekeeper. So you know, they're obviously designing the projects the most effective and most the most profitable project every consultant actually, but definitely the consulting engineers, the most profitable projects are the ones that you've built before. And by definition, the more that you change, the less profitable it is, because you have to learn to do new stuff. And people, again, don't like to learn to do new stuff. And so what you've had is people just building the same thing over and over again. And so when you have a gatekeeper that's that powerful, the people who are responsible for the spec of a project, and this is just in the physical.
It's like the same as pension consultants, and nobody wants to buy a new hedge fund. They're all just like, okay, check the box, get the bigger get bigger. We're not going to get fired for this recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the story of the intermediary. But there is something, larger. I mean, we work way beyond utilities. Utilities are only responsible for about 23% of the income of our overall portfolio. So actually, 77 of it is servicing people other than utilities. But the utility operate, like, the number one thing is stay out of the news, right? It's to stay off the pages. That's been the guiding kind of philosophy. And actually, George Hawkins at DC Water was kind of the first person who really, really went into, I mean, the transformation of DC Water as an entity was one of the most impressive case studies of not only cultural change, but just kind of the upgrading of a utility. And when you go to the headquarters now, it's just amazing kind of monolith to George's achievements. But then you have someone like Jay Burness at Hampton Roads, which is also just outside DC, something going on in DC that's really good. Like when you get the right leadership in place, these places can really move. But in general, people don't want to stick their neck out. And it's about the avoidance of bad news rather than getting column inches for doing awesome things. People are just, I want to be quiet, which doesn't help for doing things quickly.
Isn't that also, it's kind of not to get too deep, it's kind of a problem with our whole country, right? Kick the can down the road, don't be in the headlines. Mm-hmm. Like this old infrastructure, it's not going to be my problem in 30 years.
Yeah.
But it's society's problem, like it's somebody's problem.
Yeah. But and the other thing, deeply related to that, right, is that our timing is really good in terms of starting this fund, because for pursuing that logic, right, we're going to kick the can down the road, whether it's the debt, the size of the national debt, or everything that's happening in the physical world, et cetera, all the things that need to be fixed, kicking the can down the road. There comes a time at which you cannot, right? And with water, because it is so immediate, like, I always think that's a really interesting thought experiment. Imagine waking up tomorrow and going down into your kitchen to fill up your coffee pot or whatever and turning your tap on and nothing comes out. Stuff gets real really fast, really fast.
Versus there's a copper shortage and my new EV isn't going to be ready on time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything else is, you'll literally live, right? But if you suddenly have to look after your water supply, it's the only thing you care about.
That's why I live in Chicago. Just go down to the lake.
Exactly. Go and dive in and take some big gulps. Exactly. Really interesting source of edge for the Midwest, by the way. For the Great Lakes region. We have a couple of LPs that exclusively do real estate deals in the Lakes region now because of the fresh water supply. Absolutely fascinating. We're working with a bunch of people in Minneapolis for the moment, land of 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. Whereas firstly, it's maintaining it for obviously from an ecological perspective, but also they know that this is going to be a real edge for the state, is that degree of freshwater availability when you look at something like the Colorado River slightly falling over in terms of the logic of where 43 million Americans live in a desert served by a river that was miscalculated in terms of volumes when they set up the management compact. It's like there's a lot here, but it goes back to the sort of point I was saying, which is there comes a point at which you don't have a choice, and we are there, right? Once this stuff breaks, you have to fix it. And so that opens this Overton window for us to run into in terms of investing in the companies that can really transform the landscape of how water is managed, because the wallets are open now. People are making buying decisions now, whereas literally in the previous 4 decades, people were able to just kind of say everything's fine. Well, I haven't used this for a while, but I've got a chart that is the "Are we screwed yet?" graph,
Yeah.
which
I
is
love it.
which is a sort of red line across the top, and then on a time series you have a kind of a line going up, and maybe there's a little bit of maintenance that goes on, which makes you less screwed. But the point at which you are just before the screwed line, you still think you're fine, right? Because like
Yeah.
some stuff breaking is binary. And when you're close, you still think you're fine when you're close to stuff breaking. But when it actually breaks, it's go time. And that's where we are, right? That's where
You
we
think
are.
you're fine in the crashing plane right before it hits the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but it's as if that's happening, but everything feels completely fine inside the plane. It's this
Right.
weird, it's a very, very helpful dynamic. And look, it's a lot of people started VC funds, obviously, in 2020 and 2021, but starting a seed fund verticalized in water was not a super obvious idea. But when we built it from the ground up, or when I sort of built the idea from the ground up, firstly, it was an idea that wouldn't let me go. But everywhere I looked at it, it didn't feel risky in the slightest. It was just, all of the enabling conditions for this, for not only for one fund cycle, but multiple. I mean, at least as long, so 4 decades of investment, right? And that's just in the US. This is totally inevitable. The way in which water is going to be transformed in the way it is managed, in the way it is appreciated, the way it is unfortunately priced as well, that we don't participate with the other side of the trade. We want water to stay cheap. We want to invest. We want to fund the interventions that rip all the cost and complexity out of the system so that people can continue to ignore their water bills. But the price is only going to go one way. So we feel very privileged that we're sitting in this market that is just kind of only going one direction, up and to the right.
Right.
And most people haven't noticed.
And I thought you were going to say, before you came on, of like, we need it for AI cooling, it's drought, there's not enough water, like all those things are true. But you're saying it's at least half of the problem is just we haven't fixed this infrastructure in 40 years. Right? It's not that we're running out of water. Is that even physically possible? Right? Doesn't it?
Well, both of those things are happening at the same time. And it's the layering of the problem that makes the investing set compelling.
Yeah.
So we've done there's a crazy article that came out in ProPublica late last year, which in about 2012, I think, the lines crossed over where the largest contributing factor to sea level rise was not melting ice, but water being pumped out of the ground, put on the ground, and from where it then flowed into rivers and into the ocean. So we're literally pumping water out of the ground into the ocean. And now the gap is relatively sizable. The sea level rise, which is obviously a huge part of the impact of climate change, is actually as a result of the over abstraction of groundwater, which is kind of a nutty idea, especially for a water specialist to have that pointed out. But then we've done a really good job of dumping a whole load of stuff into waters. I mean, just ask the Ohio River in the 60s, right? This is a very, very convenient way of getting rid of stuff because it all goes, it naturally
away from you. Yeah.
goes downstream to whoever the poor bastard is who's left smelling it.
This is a famous Chicago fact. I don't know if you know this, that back in the 1920s or something, they reversed the flow of the Chicago River. Right? It would flow into Lake Michigan, and they said, no, we don't want all this crap in our lake, and reversed it to go down to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Poor guys. Yeah, no, for exactly this reason, right? And so we've done a really good job of degrading it. And we've done a really good job of drawing down on our water bank accounts, which is our groundwater. We've done a really, really good job of essentially mismanaging our rivers, so we can't rely on them either. We're running out of ice that's melting. So yeah, there's a massive supply problem. There's a massive quality problem. Water's now...
But can't you not, matter can't be created or destroyed? Where does it go?
When it's over abstracted, where does it go? Literally into the ocean. It just becomes salty. So then if you want to top up your fresh water supplies, you've got to make the salty fresh. And desalination, we've actually invested in a company called Flotion who just had their first scaled water. They're making 1,000, for their first box they've put down there is 1,000 liters a day. So subsea desalination, but from 500 meters underneath the surface of the ocean, which is really cool. I mean, it's
Well,
literally like, no, I mean, nobody's picked this up at all. It's not in any paper, but I don't think it's an overstatement to say that this is like somebody inventing the solar cell for energy.
why that far under? What does it do different?
So legacy desalination, I don't know whether you've seen a picture of a desalination plant, but it kind of looks like a natural gas plant. I mean, it's like
Yeah, it's a
enormous.
bunch of pumping and forcing through
There's like
membranes.
tubes all over the place. It's just, it's a mess, right? And it needs to be, firstly, that's just massive amount of expense. And secondly, it needs to be put near centers of population. And so the land is proportionately expensive. Thirdly, you're pulling up water from surface ecosystems and throwing a whole bunch of it back into surface ecosystems, which is 50% saltier than it was. So it destroys the livelihood of, everyone from, tourist related jobs all the way to the fishing community. But the main one that's really dumb is that because you can essentially, like best case, you're getting 50% fresh water. So you've overbuilt the physical infrastructure by 2x. Right, because you built it to suck up 100% of the water, and then you're throwing 50% of it back into the sea. So theoretically, you're 2x overbuilt. So all of that is just a massive amount of cost. The Saudis are building, $2.5 billion desal plants for really not that large proportion of their overall water needs. But pretty much everything about legacy desalination gets deleted if you put it at the bottom of the sea. You can use ambient pressure to replace a huge amount of the energy use. You're using about 45% less in terms of energy in order to move the water through the membranes. Because it's at the bottom of the sea, you can just tap it straight into the municipal water supplies because you only need like a shed on land for the water to come back in.
And if something screws up, you're not leaking 10 billion gallons of oil into the ocean. You're just leaking the ocean water back into the ocean.
Yeah, right, exactly. And if something, I mean, the thing you need to be really careful of is that if you've got something at 500 meters, you really don't want to have to maintain it ever because that blows up the overall economics of the thing. So it has to be ultra reliable. But this group, they were ex subsea oil and gas people. So they were sort of operators in the North Sea. And I don't know if you've ever seen the North Sea when it's showing off, but it is a very unhospitable place. It's a bad place to do business.
And I saw that movie where the guy got his hose cut off. Like those guys who go in the pressure tanks and then work on the pipelines.
Yeah.
For like way longer than they can be down there, and his hose gets cut. And he was dead for like 7 minutes down there, and they got him, and he came back to life.
It's so wild. Those operators, and they have the world's most reliable subsea pump, which is the kind of crucial element because that's the thing that always fails. It's the things that move fail first, right? And they decided to stop doing oil and gas, and partially because decline in the overall market in the North Sea, but also partially because of the direction of the family, same family that invented the sleeping bag, amazingly.
Well.
Really cool. They're serious inventors. Anyway, so they were like, well, what happens if we pump fresh water back to land? How would that work? Anyway, so they built the world's first subsea desalination company, and it's absolutely amazing. But going back to your original point, we are going to need to replenish our supplies. We're going to need to replenish our supplies, and desalination is the way in which it is done. So we're always interested in the next.
Is that even possible to replenish that all?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
is there is no other option? Yeah.
There is no other option, right?
Yeah.
There is no other option. The only other option is
wait for it to rain a lot. Yeah.
For it to rain a lot. And there are various people who get into kind of the cloud seeding side of things. A few people who are making some column inches. Actually, a very old industry has been. The Chinese, for example, have been doing this pretty consistently since the 60s.
We cloud seeding
stuff. Classifiable risks to that. And there are some really interesting ownership questions that come up if you make it rain on one side of the mountains. Like, what are the people who didn't get that rain on the other side of the mountains going to say about that, right? You're getting into like difficult what if questions that we think are slightly unstraightforward. There's some really interesting technologists going after it, and we're certainly tracking it pretty closely. But any meteorologist will say that this is it's a very, very complicated, unpredictable, interdependent system that throwing a wrench into the middle of it is going to be very useful right? It's going to be very useful. But the question is that can it be, really a step change better than what is currently done? The material science would suggest that probably yes, but we haven't quite found the right entry point for that side of things. But in terms of any kind of scale, really, yeah, we're going to need an awful lot of desalination capacity, and it's a $24 billion market growing at 11%. This is already big dollars.
Does it ever drive you crazy of like all the money going into AI? And right, like we had some uranium guys on the podcast earlier of like, that's the only answer to electrification of like, hey, like, why do we need a data center to help me build a picture of myself when I was 12 or something? Like, and just figure out the water first. People need to drink. Like, I'm sure you're doing it for profit motives, not necessarily all altruistic motives, but part of me's got to be like, and I'll shout out my buddy George, who's always arguing this of like, what are we doing? Like, we're trying to build all this AI crap to put everyone out of business, and like, what's the end point? Anyway,
Yeah,
I don't know if there was a question in there, but it's like,
no,
it's like there's real problems that need solving here. We're like literally running out of water.
Yeah, in my more kind of like judgy moments, so I obviously work on water, and I feel pretty good about it. Right, this is the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're gonna, etc. And I certainly derive a huge amount of satisfaction from it. And so when I'm not going to name individual jobs because they might be like, I do think that it would be really great if we could turn the time and talent of all of these incredibly smart people, especially who are holed up kind of in the middle of the belly of the beast of kind of like large tech, into things that would actually solve real problems in the real world, rather than being a product manager for some section of like Instagram or whatever. Not to like throw any shade. I just think there's an awful lot of work to be done. But then
to your point, we don't think about it. We don't know it's a problem.
Well, when I find myself feeling sort of sanctimonious, I then think about my amazing wife who works 55 feet from me through a couple of doors. And she works for the International Rescue Committee, and she works on, she started off her work in childhood malnutrition amongst refugee populations. But all of her work is basically looking at completely overhauling the world of humanitarian aid. And that's real work in the real world. Those are absolutely extraordinary people who do all of that. So I kind of dial down the sanctimony.
Yeah.
I dial down the sanctimony. But in terms of the AI stuff, look, intelligence on demand is, you can do all sorts of stuff when that's available. We use it for a lot of total crap, but I think the pricing mechanism is going to pop those kind of recreational uses, or at least we'll see what happens with the various structures. I mean, we'll like open source and low cost stuff is going to be there to do it. I would say that on balance, I'm probably an AI optimist, but it's what we are professionally. What I'm, asked to do is kind of underwrite the physical build out of it. And for us as a market, it's not that great, which sounds really weird because they're going to be building a lot of, firstly, the building of it is actually incredibly unpredictable. And so if you're a water intervention, you are fully reliant on the actual building of the actual data center. And that is becoming increasingly unreliable as to what's going to get built and what's going to get shut down by communities. And communities are going to get better and better and better at doing this, which is a totally existential problem for the AI companies, which they haven't quite come to deal with yet.
We need to put your, I was in a conference in Puerto Rico. They were talking about putting one on the bottom of the ocean. Like, then it can be all cooled. It's out of everyone's sight.
Yeah, about every 6 months. That's every 6 months for the last kind of 8 or 9 years. I think that a picture comes up of like, Microsoft are going to do this in the Bay Area or whatever.
Yeah.
The latest one, I think I just saw one last week from, I think it's a Chinese experiment that's happening. I can't remember exactly where. Yeah, I mean, put them in space, put them at the bottom of the sea, sure. But, again, if you're going to put them in the sea, there's an awful lot of things that, like, water and electricity don't mix well. And people can obviously keep them separate. That's not a particularly tricky engineering problem. But there are also kind of easier ways of doing it.
But in your space, it's doing the water cooling.
Water is predominantly used for cooling, but when you think about AI and the sort of water's interaction with AI, it's so the 3% of it goes into the data center, and then the remainder is split evenly between water for the energy needs, and that will change depending on the overall energy mix, but that's about 50% of the 97%, and then the other half is in semiconductor manufacturing, because water use in semiconductor manufacturing, after price, is the primary determinant of profitability, because it's the primary determinant of yield from semiconductor production. Ultra pure water used to wash the chips after every etching.
Really?
And so the volumes actually really show up in semiconductor fabs and in power plants. I think a decently illustrative, so data centers use about 1/43 of the water that golf courses use.
1/43.
And that really isn't going to change that much. They've already done a really good job of essentially making these things kind of closed loop, but everybody's working on it concurrently. But what I've been really surprised at is that they're very, very bad at telling that story. But it's difficult, right? It's a really good argument against something to say you're going to steal all of my water, because people freak out, and refuting that. I can't remember exactly what the law is, but it takes an order of magnitude more.
Yeah, if you say we're not going to steal your water, your first instinct is they're going to steal my water.
Yeah. Or if somebody has said, if somebody says they're going to steal your water, it's almost too late. Right.
Yeah.
Because getting people comfortable again is really, really difficult. And actually they need kind of the hyperscalers need actually a shot. Like I have no idea why they don't just go into communities and solve all of their water problems. It really would not be that expensive. It really wouldn't be that expensive.
That'd be brilliant. Hey, let's do a little trade here.
Yeah, absolutely. They should do it for energy, and they should do it for water. You just go and, there are 1 million people in the Central Valley, right, that don't have access to reliable, clean drinking water. You can just go and solve that problem, and then they'll let you build whatever you want, right? It's annoying. It's annoying to me because, what you could have actually, in terms of lost revenue and slower build out like people hitting their limits and competitive, all the hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars that are at stake in this insane arms race that's going on. It really would be a very, very simple and very, very helpful use of not that much proportionately, right? In order to
for their budgets of like carve off 5% or something. Yeah.
Solve everybody's water problem. Solve everybody's sanitation problems. Hookworm is back in the southeastern US, which is why the Rockefeller Foundation was started in the first place. We are going backwards. It's really mad. Yeah.
And when I think of the problems, I think of like Flint, Michigan with the lead pipes, right?
Yeah.
But that's a simplistic. You're saying like Hookworm is a result of what, computer systems
inadequate home sanitation. So essentially, fecal matter and urine in people's yards, essentially, and then kids running around. This is a problem in the US today.
Oh, because they're on like septic or whatever. They're not on a.
Yes, or not. So often not even on that.
Oh, good.
There's a fantastic book on this called Waste, and then the wonderful author's name is escaping me for the moment. But the stuff that we all take for granted in, this state of modernity that we find ourselves in the United States is not accessible to everybody. And it's certainly well within the wherewithal of the hyperscalers to go and just materially improve the communities and the pocketbooks of the people in the communities in order to establish a license to operate. But there's been a kind of resistance. There's been a resistance to it, whereas actually you just need to skip to the end. This is probably where they're going to have to end up in anyway.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that's been, and I know a lot of people who do the replenishment work, and it's great. Like, they're replenishing, doing projects to replenish the water within a given watershed. But if you take it to, like any person where you want to build a data center in Ohio or Kentucky or Maine or whatever, the first question is going to be, what the hell is a watershed, right? Nobody understands the way in which water works. And so saying like, well, we've done this project 50 miles that way, which actually is totally fine in terms of your available water. People are going to be like, that's 50 miles. Stop showing me charts. Like, this is nowhere near immediate enough for me to care. And they're sort of still doing it, which is great. Like, from a water person's point of view, they're doing exactly what they should, which is maintaining volumes within watersheds. But in terms of winning that argument, it's just, I just feel like they're sort of inching their ways towards what is going to happen in the end anyway, which is you kind of got to throw money at the problem and improve the community. So why don't you just skip to the end?
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you know too much? Like you're at a restaurant and they give you the glass of water and you're kind of, oh, I'm in this town and I know this. Like,
I mean, every once in a while. Yeah, when you know you're in a sort of either high PFAS or high nitrate concentration or whatever it might be. All water people are very much kind of like tap water drinkers. It happens rarely, mercifully, but it does happen. But like, you're often sort of out of the frying pan and into the fire unless you've got really sort of fancy glass bottled water, because the water from the plastic bottle is, it traveled a huge amount it usually traveled a very large distance, usually on a plane. So it's been pressurized and depressurized. It's probably got really hot. So you've got a whole bunch of stuff leaching in there from the plastics. You've got the microplastics that have leached off the inside of the plastic bottle. It's all a huge mess.
So you're not drinking much plastic bottled water.
Well, it's also partially, I just feel like a chump.
Yeah.
It's so unbelievably expensive. People always talk about the cost of water. One of the really interesting things I find about it is the water's cost is totally fungible, right? It's kind of a fraction of a cent if it's coming out of the faucet. It's, $2 if it's in the lemonade of the kid down the street that's selling it to you in the summertime. It's going to be whatever, $1.50 from the cooler in the deli. It's going to be $2.50 from the cooler in the lobby of the hotel. And it's going to be $7.50 if you get it out of the minibar.
Yeah.
Like, the cost of water is not a thing. It's not a thing. It's just entirely based on
convenience.
Water people would really appreciate, right? Is the packaging and context matters, right?
But you said earlier,
sorry,
you thought the price is going up.
Well, the price is going up, and it will go up in terms of municipal water. It has to, but the denominator is so low. That people won't notice because nobody has any idea what they pay for their water anyway. I mean, you barely anybody is able to say what their water bill is, including people who work in the water sector. One of the most interesting things when I turned up was in 2015. I was at I was in an investment conference, and the question went out to this like amazing set of people, 250 odd people in San Francisco. Hands up people who know how much they pay for their water. And maybe 20% of the room put their hands up. And that was for water people, right?
Yeah.
That was for water people. Absolutely extraordinary. People have absolutely no idea what they're paying. But both on water and crucially on sewerage. Sewerage is actually going up faster than drinking water prices. At the household and at the business level, that's the really big one, because wastewater is proportionally expensive, but it's also easy to overlook. So it's kind of this stealth tax around the water side of things, because everything needs a connection to a sewer line. And so the pricing thing is obviously really important, but we're really serious when we say we don't want the price of water to go up. It'll be helpful to our business models, that's fine. But actually on a kind of an impact perspective, because it's the first thing that people have to pay. You can't turn off the water into people's houses. They've got it. It's the first bill they pay. It's basically precludes you from doing kind of everything else. It's a regressive tax, because the least able to pay are the people who obviously are disproportionately hit. But we also factor it into our investment decision making, is that everything that we invest in has to make sense in the absence of water price rises. We can't be betting on future water. Right. It's too unpredictable. You can't do it. Everything has.
Well, it's politically
unstable,
right?
Like, it's completely political. Yeah, it is anathema. It is anathema. It's very, very unpopular. It's very difficult to get water rate cases through, partially because they are ratified by the water board, who are elected. And a really good way of not getting elected next time round is presiding over a water rate increase. So,
but to fix all that's part of the problem, right? It's like a vicious cycle. Like, to fix all this stuff, you need to raise the price so you can pay for the
absolutely
pay your companies.
I mean, partially, but it's plenty big enough already. You know, a lot of people, a lot of investors are sort of worried about this because water's so cheap. Water's fine. It really is $1.6 trillion a year in capex and opex. This is a monster, absolute monster market. And it can only get more expensive. It is absurdly cheap at the moment. When you think about a kind of a cell phone bill coming in at $80 a month.
Yeah.
This is vastly more important to you than your cell phone, but water has done a very, very bad job of reference pricing.
I think some teenagers would give up water before their cell phone, but point taken.
Yeah. Actually, Hello has got a really fun feature. It's the teenage feature where you can actually turn the hot water off if your teenager is having too long a shower.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Just turn it cold. It's great. Super fun.
Yeah, they'll get right out of it.
The scourge of bill payers everywhere.
So how many companies total are in the portfolio?
We've done 34 investments. We've had one go out of business. We just processed our third exit and returned our first capital to LPs out of Fund 1. So we're looking after 30 at the moment, but we're about to do numbers 35 and 36 out of our seed fund. And then it looks like number 37 in our growth fund is going to be happening. So yeah, it's a wide swathe of technology. We are by some distance the most active water investor in the world, but we're lonely, but we're not alone. We have some fantastic peers who do really top quality work in water investment as well. But we've built a portfolio that we're proud of, and certainly in this kind of timeline, one of the things that was sort of thrown at us is that you won't find enough targets. Our no's now are just unbelievably hard and difficult, and put them in our anti-portfolio and watch them through gritted teeth as they do amazing work. And it's really tough, right? And that's the way it should be. That's the sign of a healthy market. But yeah, we're soon going to be at 37 deals done.
And who do the exits look like? Like government contracts or whatnot? Or no, they're getting bought up by, like, who's the big players that are buying them up?
So there are three real avenues, right? You've got the classic strategics, or incumbents, but choose your nomenclature poison. So that would be companies like Xylem, who are our largest investor, for example, deeply highly regarded and rightly so, water company. And then, Veolia and Veralto and, these kind of majors. Badger has been doing a lot. Itron has been doing a lot. Ecolab have been doing a lot of acquisitions in the water sector. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with the strategics, but then you've got a really interesting class of companies who are kind of getting into this. So Siemens, Schneider Electric, Autodesk has made a couple.
That's who I would thought you would have said. I had never heard from that first group of companies, but they're probably even more focused than you are, right? On like one.
Yeah, they're very large companies. I mean, Xylem is a $30-odd billion market cap.
That's part of our whole conversation here. Nobody knows how big this is or how important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really serious. And Veolia is, obviously enormous. Ecolab as well. Veralto, very large. So yeah, the very, very deep pockets for the right companies. We share a couple of cap tables with Pentair, who are doing some really interesting stuff in this space. But the emerging strategics are really important because they're trying to get footholds in the markets, and the more that you can build them those footholds and give them a place to land, especially with something that is fundamentally competitive and unlikely to get less competitive, just because of the nature of the technological jump. That kind of, it's the kind of healthy tension that you're looking to kind of build into. But then obviously really important in this is private equity. And private equity has been doing a lot of really interesting stuff. So the number of exited deals is up 7 times since 2020. Live deals is up 3.5 times since 2020. The private equity crew have really got the memo on this because critical infrastructure is a really good place to be. Yeah. Now, look, it's not like private equity, there are all sorts of things you need to kind of watch out for just by nature of their business model. But as an exit pathway, this is incredibly important because, again, these markets are absolutely massive. They're big enough to support multiple changeovers of control, which is at the kind of core of the private equity decision making. Can I sell it is predicated on the next person being able to sell it. So you're actually thinking about 2 turns, right? Unless you put it into the public markets, but they'll be thinking similarly. But there's a line out the door. JMI just did a really, really interesting deal. New Mountain did a $2 billion continuation vehicle for their Azuria platform. EQT has been having a very good time with Saw, Neyhouse. And
they're just buying the technology. Like they're not buying a customer list or anything like on a typical software or something, right?
It
They're just
depends on what it is. We've seen there have been a couple of groups, M33, Edison, JMI as well, who are investing in companies that they want to be at the center of platforms. KKR did a really interesting roll up of nutrient related treatment companies alongside the great crew at XPV Capital. They just sold that on to Oldcastle, which is part of the CRH group, for 600 odd million. Great deal, really good platform. So the platform deals, people are, it's a big wide open space. There's a lot of, variegated and disaggregated verticals that there's some really interesting work that can be done, plumbers, for example, right? Or outdoor contractors. This is all stuff that interrelates with the water side of things. And there's a whole bunch more work to be done. So that's how we see it. But we are, we've had 10
You ever think of launching your own private equity firm and like continuing the chain on?
It's so funny. I was just speaking to a very large Danish company that is the foundation of a very large and popular product in the healthcare world. And I was just saying that sometimes I wake up and I sort of start thinking about like maybe like there's so much opportunity, everything from the private equity to, private debt, all the stuff that you can do if you have a completely differentiated view of a market like we do. I mean, literally everything, hardware and software, just got put on the table by the AI revolution, right? And so should we be actually founding our own companies? There's such a wide potential playing field. But I think there's real beauty and actual sense and wisdom in sticking to your knitting. I mean, we started at seed. We now do early growth at the Series B. It makes sense for us to be a kind of an early stage financing platform, and we want to go as early as we possibly can. But you've just seen a lot of people getting kind of distracted by shiny objects. I mean, I'm a founder like anyone else, right? It just happens that my product is a venture fund or just a provision of capital. And the classic way for a founder to trip over their shoelaces is to get distracted. We call it
do more stuff.
Get distracted by shiny objects. So there is wisdom in the maintenance of focus. But sometimes I do just think, God, how the hell has no one noticed? It's so crazy.
Is it hard for you to like see your children leave the nest, right? Like you've gone early into these guys, you've helped them grow, you've seen the space, they're growing with the space, and then they get sold, and you're like, oh.
You have a bit of a run up while you're like you have sell it like every time
or is it
when the
champagne? Pop the champagne, like,
God, that like I feel like that company's going to be great. Like we should, maintenance of participation, but then you've got to go and be you've got to be an RIA and all the rest of it to follow it through the whole of the life cycle. And this is I think this is the fun bit, right? But you also have a run up to that. You do you have enough time to get used to the idea. I think one of the things that what I feel is profound gratitude. There are so many VCs out there who are just sort of taking victory laps, and the whole thing is so ugly because they don't do any of the work. Like a VC's job is unbelievably easy compared to the knife fight in the phone box that is starting a company and dragging it into the world against the forces of entropy. I mean, it's just so unbelievably difficult. So when it gets done, I'm just like, well, thank you very much for working insanely hard on behalf of my investors.
Yeah.
Let me think of an ideally incredibly thoughtful gift. I'd leave it up to them as to whether or not it lands. And then, a handwritten letter to say, really, just like, thank you. This is an extraordinary thing that you were able to do. But it does, I'm so proud of the relationships that we've formed with the founders. Hopefully they would say the same. We think that they do. But it's a great relationship, right? Because we don't want to be hands-off. We want to be helpful. And obviously the old adage for VCs is let me know if I can be helpful. And the most helpful VC is one who keeps their mouth shut for as long as possible.
Keep pocketbook open, mouth shut.
Keep pocketbook open and the mouth shut, exactly.
And it's odd to me that all the money in VC and in like San Francisco, we were talking about everyone's nice, but also like other people's money, and I'm going to start this thing and fail. And I just lost those people's money. But You're
Right.
saying like you're tapping into maybe, and that's part of your process of like, I want to
Well,
make
I
sure
mean,
they're aligned and they're not just looking to burn through money and fail fast.
well, it would not work if we pursued that. One of our strengths, I think, is that we've really built this. We've built our version of venture capital from the ground up, which with the basic goes. A lot of the received wisdom in VC is just to do with the power law, right? The way in which you make the economics work is by having a couple of blowout successes in every fund. I mean, Fred Wilson says a third, right? You make your money on the third, you get your money back on the third, and you lose lose the third. But in general, people are now really addicted to this idea that it's actually much more extreme than that, right? Because of the trillicorn, I guess we're talking.
Yeah, we went right beyond unicorn. Yeah,
yeah, right. Just
but you don't foresee any of your companies could become unicorns, right? It's like not the same scale. Or
there are a couple where they're absolutely on the table. Yeah,
got it.
No question. I mean, we just transacted one company for over for a well on the way to that, basically. But our financial model isn't predicated on it, and that's really important. So we see VC's job is 3x net, mid-20s IRR. That's the job of the VC, and it's like the mathematical pathway to that is all on the table. However you can make it work. And what works for us is that we get in that very reasonable entry pricing, which means that our multiples can be provided by companies that don't have to go and sell for $140 billion or even $1 billion, right? We can do very, very well with companies. In some cases, transact at 90 million and we'd still do great, right?
But you said only one bankrupt. Like, isn't that the opposite of most venture models? Is 80 bankruptcies and 10 successes?
By design, right? I mean, I every time I sort of say something that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, I need to sort of stop myself and knock on all of the available wood, right? Because this is entirely predicated on the skill and hard work and resilience of the founders. But we really do select businesses that we think have the bones to go and be the solution in their vertical, and all of them should work out. The other thing is that, like, what I really hate about the mainstream VC model is that all of these things are going to go out of business. There is a material deadweight loss to kind of overall society. All of these things in water, if we have selected them, they need to exist. They need to be built. And so what you have, just because, like, if something's gone out of business, okay, fine, you've got somebody who can turn around and take that experience off into something else. But you do have, there are negative externalities to it. One, the solution itself doesn't become a thing in the market, which if it needs to exist, that's sad, right? That's a thing to happen. Secondly, their seed investors and their friends and family, no one ever blames their process, right? If something goes wrong, no one ever blames their process. They blame the thing. And so we've seen so many examples of this where people kind of come marching into the water sector and they write some big check at some extraordinary valuation. And then the thing in general, it seems anyway, it happens to not make any sense. The times that people, non-specialists, have come marching in, writing big checks, it tends to not have worked out. And in the end, what they do is blame water. They don't blame their own shonky underwriting. They blame water. And I think
the space wasn't ready yet or whatever.
All that it's, yes, everybody told me it was too hard because everything's too hard. And actually they don't look at the thing and say, well, actually what you were doing was kind of falling for field of dreams syndrome. And you heard that like 49% of water that is treated in Italy falls out of a hole in the pipe before it gets to the consumer. And then you go and march off.
Is that true? Yeah.
That is actually true. Yeah. And then you go and like march into some leak detection company without knowing that there are 141 leak detection companies at last count. The actual unit economics of this are genuinely quite bad, and that the economically rational thing for a utility to do in those circumstances is not replace pipe at like $1.8 million a mile. It's to push more water through a broken system, right? It's like people don't get that far. There are great stories that abound in water, everything from atmospheric water generation to, desalination in a backpack, all of this stuff that is very attractive from an idea. But if you've spent time in this world, the stuff that is intuitive tends to not be a great investment for a whole bunch of different reasons. But if you're a tourist and you come in because you decided that this is going to be like water, it's water.
I'm a tourist.
Go, it's water time. Let's go because the market's 1.6 trillion and this seems fun.
let's talk, because I had invested way back when in an ETF. So there's a water ETF, I believe, still. Like, why
A few of
is
them.
that a good? So people buy the thesis, okay, water is important.
It's
It's
had
underinvested in.
the
What do
global
I do?
water. So global water intelligence has its own. I don't know whether it's actually an ETF, but I believe it
Maybe it was an
is. But it
ETN or
just
something.
dipped back on the 20-year record. Just dipped back under the S&P. Only just really in the last 3 months, and that's because there's been a big rewriting of industrials, and in public markets, water is treated as an industrial, which I think is actually slightly unfair. It's not
Yeah.
totally accurate, just because the cash flows are much more reliable because people pay their water bills first. I mean, there is obviously some correlation between industrial activity and overall water use, so it's not super extreme. But actually, I think that the beta should be a lot lower than it is.
But for you, you're like, that's less sexy, essentially. Like, it's in bigger players and whatnot.
It's in the bigger players, and they will be eventually. We haven't seen a ton of it yet, or at least we haven't run the historical analyses of what happens to public market prices when they take on new technology. It's actually something that we should be we should be doing. But in general, there's a huge barbell in water, right? You have the kind of the mega companies, and then there's not really much in what you would call kind of like the small to mid cap stuff. And there's certainly very little in the micro cap. And we're really, the reason we started our growth fund is that we think we're at the inflection point of the S curve, where we're just starting to get the steep bit of the curve in terms of the production of really the first generation of scaled startups that are going to be going for, going to be taken on for a really significant sum of money. So the public markets will absolutely be waking up to the technological potential, especially in things like, membranes or in all sorts of actually water services. Digital water as well is going to be a really important one.
Digital water. I'm going to have to make you explain what that is.
Oh, I mean, so anything that allows water to be managed better by software.
Got it.
And so that could be everything from a SCADA system to monitoring and sensing within lines to the information that goes into sewer maintenance to, it's all of the stuff that really is the information that allows you to manage the system better. That's what we refer to as digital water.
What other thoughts you got for us? Anything we missed?
No, I think it's pretty far-reaching set of conversation. It's really, really fun.
Definitely.
I think the one thing I always want people to take away is that we would love people to take this part of the world seriously as a business, but also recognize kind of the truth, which is that this is a serious business that can give you the warm and fuzzies. That this is a real area of the economy where you can invest just as a hard-nosed investor, and as a result of your capital allocation, you get to feel better because the way in which the money is used is to improve the fundamental substrate of all human and commercial and frankly natural life and activity. Right? This is a really good way to spend your time and treasure. And if people are interested in it, I'm embarrassingly easy to find, So
we'll put it in the show notes.
I'm totally up for speaking to anybody who'd like to, have a chat. But that to me is the thing that is really compelling, that there are huge returns to be made here. I'm a private markets person. I can't speak to the public markets, though. When I look at a lot of these companies, I think there's certainly a huge amount of value there to be taken in the public markets. But also those ETFs are finally going to have some new tickers within them. It's been relatively steady, but there are new tickers coming for sure. But you can have your cake and eat it. That this is a place where your capital can be put to work to fundamentally either reinforce or really make people's lives better, and to keep us safe in the context of climate change, because this water is the so what of what we're all experiencing at the moment in terms of heat and rain and tornadoes and all the rest of the stuff that's going on.
But that's the cherry on top, right? Like the main motive is profit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
About 20% of our LPs, we have 164 at last count. So about 20% of our LPs are strictly impact LPs, but we are 100% we want to be the best performing asset in your whole portfolio. We're looking at.
We didn't even get into greenwashing and all that. I think you talked to
The
me
blue washing?
in Miami how big of a weird scam that is, but yeah.
Yeah. There's certainly a lot going on. There's certainly a lot going on, but no, we are, it's like we're looking at mid-20s IRR. That's our target. We want to be the best performing position in your portfolio. And honestly, with our, after 5.5 years with our results, so far, so good. So obviously, long may it continue. I just said something self-aggrandizing, so I'll knock on all the wood again.
Knock on the wood. And maybe you get a nice t-shirt out of it too.
And maybe I get, exactly. This is the VC's reason for being is all of the swag.
Let's leave it here. I didn't prep you for this or anything, but especially this. Your favorite water movie, which is there such a thing? I had a couple popped into my head. Water World.
Aaron Brockovich. We just rewatched it.
Water Boy.
It is so good.
Yeah.
It is so good. Waterboy's not bad. Waterboy's not bad.
I was going with just movies that have water in the title, but I like Aaron Brockovich is for sure a mismanaged water story, right?
This is a little bit off to the left, I guess, but I was a really big fan of A River Runs Through It.
Ooh.
Do you remember that movie?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic movie.
Great.
Yeah.
But we're like big.
Like that's the fresh water in everyone's mind of like pure, unadulterated.
I know,
fresh.
just like, and then like Brad Pitt looking dishy.
Yeah, love it. I'm going to go with Waterboy, maybe Water World. Yeah.
Do it. Yes. Well, Costner. Gotta love a bit of Costner. Great guy.
Yeah.
I already referenced Field of Dreams earlier, and actually that's great. I think that's gonna be one of the next ports of call with my son. Great.
Yeah. How old's your son?
9.
Those were good. Mine's now 17, but we went through that period of like, you got to watch this. You got to watch this.
And I was like, Dad. And then
and you're like, this will build your personality and your character. Trust me.
I need to get him. He needs to get old enough for me to show him things like The Rock.
Yes.
The real class.
Hey, that's another water movie. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Love it. It's everywhere.
San Francisco Collection. No, Jeff, this was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Tom. We'll put all your info in the show notes, so reach out with any water questions, and we'll leave it there.
Perfect. Cheers, sir.
Okay, that's it for the pod. Thanks to Tom for the great conversation. Thanks to RCM for sponsoring. Thanks to Jeff Berger for producing. We'll be back next week with a guest to help answer the thought, so you want to start an ETF. Peace.
You've been listening to The Derivative. Links from this episode will be in the episode description of this channel. Follow us on Twitter at RCMAlts and visit our website to read our blog or subscribe to our newsletter at rcmalts.com. If you liked our show, introduce a friend and show them how to subscribe. And be sure to leave comments. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinions and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of RCM Alternatives, their affiliates, or companies featured. Due to industry regulations, participants on this podcast are instructed not to make specific trade recommendations nor reference past or potential profits, and listeners are reminded that managed futures, commodity trading, and other alternative investments are complex and carry a risk of substantial losses. As such, they are not suitable for all investors.